Well, welcome to another Kids at Home conversation from Kids at Heart International. And tomorrow marks the 1-year anniversary of Kids at Home. We're so happy to have been bringing this ministry to you, and to celebrate that 1-year anniversary, we have a very special guest with us today. So we'll be focusing on how God can use the spiritual practice of practicing God's presence to transform us, the big people, and the children we care for. So today's conversation is called Noticing That God is Near. And I'm Gordon West, president of Kids at Heart International.
And hello, Gordon. I'm Adam Ormord. I'm the Chief Culture Officer with Kids at Heart, and we are delighted to welcome our very special guest, the one who started it all, Melissa MacDonald, to join us in this conversation.
So
Melissa, I feel like there should be clapping in the background right now.
Oh, there is at home and everywhere internationally.
We can add it.
People are standing up at their computers to applaud.
Stop it, everyone. Thank you.
So Melissa has been a co-host with us a number of times. But now she's returning as a guest because she always kind of wanted to talk a lot as the co-host anyway. So, she might as well be the focus. But Melissa is often found speaking on children's ministry related topics. But you can also find her speaking about leadership and discipleship, healthy churches, and, a particular closeness to my heart, soul care, and so many things. She's a trainer and a coach, and just a hot speaker. Everybody wants her for adult conferences, but also for kids camps and youth events. And she's anxious for COVID to allow that to start happening again. I know it's been hard for her to be not doing those. And Melissa is really considered one of the leading voices in children's ministry, not just in the US, but around the world. She's also the author of, Melissa, am I getting this all right? The stuff you told us to say?
She's enjoying this.
She's also the author of Missing, an urgent call for the church to rescue kids. Excellent book. Go out and get it. Melissa, finally, welcome. And we hope you're doing well this morning in your home in Iowa.
I'm home in Iowa, and my pandemic puppy is napping in the corner here. So I have a 5-month-old puppy who's napping. I can't promise he won't join us at some point, but I'm good. And it's really fun to be on. This is one of the most special things for me that came out of the pandemic, was this connection and being able to have these conversations. How fun to be back on. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Yes, and it's hard to believe that tomorrow, 1 year ago tomorrow, was when we released the 7-minute video to explain what Kids at Home was all about, and then we rolled out the first talk together, and you've blessed us with your wisdom many, many times.
Thank you, Melissa. It's always been so wonderful to listen to you help us walk through these conversations. Part of that is because you're so good at telling things from your own life, your ministry context in which you work with children, and your own story. So just to get our conversation warmed up today, Melissa, I want to ask you if you have a childhood memory just of when God made you aware of his presence in a special way.
I was doing some thinking about that because I got that question ahead of time, and I can't pinpoint any one necessarily particular moment as a child. As a teenager, I remember, but I was always outside growing up, and I really always connected with God in nature. So I would be off in the woods. We had lived on 10 acres that bumped up to a state park. And so I always was very aware that beauty equaled God, and sweet moments. I was very aware that God was present. That was never a doubt in my mind. And then I remember being probably 15 and really hearing God's voice for the first time, and just him affirming his love for me. And that was a life-changing moment for me. It was freaky too, because I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, that's God. And so that was really a special thing as well. But I think I've just kind of always been very aware. And I would say, I find most kids are very aware that God is present. And so it's normal for them. And so it was just normal for me as a kid to be aware that God was around me and working and present.
Melissa had that very conversation just coming into our recording time with a church planting ministry, and explaining to them that a lot of our battle is getting adults to do the practices. And And because it is so hard for us as adults, sometimes we don't believe that children can do them. And in reality, introducing these things to children is quite easy. They're like, well, yeah, duh. Of course.
They're already doing it.
Yeah, they're already doing
maybe
it.
aren't using the words, but they're
exactly.
Yeah, they're already doing it.
Yeah, sometimes it's just labeling it for them. So
yeah.
Well, let me ask both of you this question then. So how did God come to help you view practicing his presence then as a Christian practice for spiritual formation? Melissa, how did that happen for you?
I think for me, I mean, I remember being early teens and going through the book Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby. And the premise was that God is always at work around us. And that was kind of drilled into me because we had to memorize it, we had to repeat it, all that kind of stuff. But as much as I kind of didn't love it then, it has really become a foundational part of who I am, is understanding God's always at work around us. And so I think that was a big one, was going, oh, he is always at work. And you know, kids are aware of that. You hit the teens and life kind of hits you in the face. And suddenly you're like, oh, this is not the magical lamb that I thought it was. And so for me, it was realizing, no, God's still there, even though I can't feel him, or even though I don't see him, or I don't love where I'm at or what's going on, God's still present. And that was a real foundational thing for me.
Yeah. The Blackaby Experiencing God, like noticing what God's up to and then joining God at work, right? That was a great kind of an entry point for me too, even before I'd ever heard of the language spiritual formation. That stuck with me too. And I think that's exactly very helpful in what we're talking about today.
Well, and Blackaby's book, you two are so young, but so I have an older adult's perspective. Blackaby's book changed so many lives because it was a radically new concept for many, many Christians to think that God is present and God is at work. For me as well. For me, I really didn't come into this concept of practicing his presence. That was foreign territory for me until maybe 15 years ago. And like you, it's oftentimes outdoors that I connect. And I noticed on retreats I was taking that I would see things in nature that made me think God was actually speaking to me. And I think, no, that's not happening. And God is so patient. I remember one time taking a walk around a lake and seeing a grove of trees, and there was one that was very different, and I felt God was just saying to me, you're different and it's okay, you're in my design. And I thought, oh, my brain is just making that up, that's not what God would do. And I got back to the group later that night, and as I was walking through the feeding line, a lady I hardly knew turns to me and says, hey, Gordon, I was out on the trail today and I saw this tree in a whole grove of trees, and it was very different than the others, and I thought of you. I think God had that for you. And I'm like, okay, God, thank you for making it so incredibly clear.
Oh, I love that.
And that helped me get out of a very conservative background that would not allow that, to be able to say, oh, my God is real and active and around me, and has something to say to me whenever I'm ready to listen. So
and personal. And that's the thing I love about it. It, like, someone else might see that same thing and that, like, oh, pretty tree or whatever, it doesn't mean anything, but I love how personal God is. And I think that's hard sometimes to figure out, because you're like, well, that person didn't experience that, and realizing, no, we serve a God who is personal to us.
And that's what I love about what our creator of today's talk did in entitling it "Noticing That God Is Near." Yeah. That's much of it is just notice. See that thing that sticks out, that impresses itself upon you, because God is doing that for you personally. Yes, and maybe no one else will notice because it's not for them, and that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Spirit of God can really use this practice as a means to nurture our love relationship with God. He's certainly done that with me. That personal part, like you say, Melissa, is just, you go, oh, wow, God, you're paying attention to me. You know me. And that's what we want for our children, though. Our desire at KidZ at Heart is to help children fall deeply in love with Jesus. And this is one of the ways we can help them. So, Melissa, you're great at making things real for kids. So when you're going to explain and define practicing the presence of God to children, and I know with you, it's usually to crowds of over 10,000, but you have these huge auditoriums filled with children you're speaking to.
I spoke to a room of 5 yesterday. It's very humbling.
Well, and I know you also do a lot of one-on-one counseling throughout your camps and things, and you always have great stories. But what would you say to them? What kind of child-friendly language would you use to explain to a child what it means to practice the presence of God?
Yeah, so I love this question. I'm so glad we get to talk about this because it is a passion of mine. And really in this last year, God's done something. I feel like even Henry Blackaby's book was stupid simple, kind of like we read it and we're like, well, duh, why, like, why did I not realize that? And so this last year, God's been kind of like stupid simple teaching me like, hey, Mel, I'm always at work around you. You need to be on the lookout for me. And so I've even been changing how I'm praying. Like, God, instead of saying, God, meet us here, I'm like, God, help us to notice you because we already know you're here. And those are little ways that I like to talk to kids. Couple things I do, wording I like to do is be on the lookout for God. And I'll say, God has you here for a reason, or God is doing something and you don't want to miss it. So be on the lookout for God, make sure you don't miss it. When I speak at camps, and in fact, I did a middle school and high school retreat, actually last month. It was actual real life people. I felt like Elsa in the movie, like people, and it was socially distanced, but it still smelled bad because they're that age, so it felt very normal. And but I tell any group I'm talking to, even adults, like, God has you here for a reason. And I'm going to do my job as the speaker, as the pastor, as the leader, to share with you what God's put on my heart. But you have a job too. And it isn't just to sit there quietly, it's to be on the lookout for why God has you here. And I do that with kids all the time. And with kids, I'll even say, if you miss it, that's not my fault, that's your fault. And you need to be tuning your ears and your eyes and everything to be watching, God, what do you want to show me? What do you have to teach me? If I have enough of a relationship and I've been able to explain that God can speak to us, because with kids, they're so literal. So if you say speak, they're listening for a voice. But if I can help them understand God speaks in all different ways, I'll say that God has something to say to you today, or God has something to say to you this week. You don't want to miss it. It would be just a shame if you came all this way for a week and missed why God wanted you here. So little things like that. And I like to refer to it as putting kids into an active participant role instead of passive participant role.
Yes.
So often we're like, just be quiet, just sit still, stop moving. And then they become very passive. And it's more of a, let's just get through this instead of, God, what do you want to show me right now? So it's, I love how
in your explanation, I love how you're creating an adventure. It's it's a treasure hunt. Watch for God. That's very exciting.
I, as a leader, as a parent, as a whatever, as the adults in the room, have to be willing to be humble enough to go, God might not even use me to do the work he wants to do in this kid's life. So what I love is when I'm at a camp and kids are like, oh, well, I was on the zip line and God taught me that he's going to take care of me no matter how scary life gets. And I'm like, well, that wasn't in my sermon. Like I am the pastor. You're like, and I have to just go, you know what, God, that's so cool. That's and rejoice in that, because they're doing what I've told them to do, be on the lookout for God. And that doesn't just mean in the chapel time or in our Bible time. And so I love when God does that, and it has nothing to do with me. That to me is a win all the way around.
Sometimes we can mess it all up by being too firmly attached to our plans, can't we?
Yes.
We had a board retreat, I think maybe board and staff, and hired, or rented a facility so that we'd have this wonderful time of solitude and silence. And what we failed to ask the question about is, during our, hour of solitude and silence, will your gardeners actually be out there with their lawnmowers and blowers and everything? It was just constant power motors on and off and rev and back for that whole hour. And the person who had planned the whole retreat was so disappointed. And then every single person that came in said, wow, that was powerful, because God told me that I could seek him and seek solitude and silence with him in the midst of a busy world of chaos. And she's like, oh, so God had a deeper level of connection today than my plan. And
I love that.
He's so good at that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is some of the work too of spiritual direction when we work with adults and with children, is this idea of paying attention to how God is working in and around you. And even when we quiet ourselves to slow down and just kind of listen, what might God be saying? It's really important for us to just hold everything before God, all those different thoughts, all those different things that come flooding in, and not try to go, oh, that's God, that's not God, but just be recognizing that God's in all these things of our life too. And I think it's good for adults and children to be reminded of this. So what are some misconceptions or bad practices that that you would say we need to just kind of deal with up front as we're introducing children and adults to the spiritual practice of paying attention, practicing the presence of God?
I think a couple of notes that I've written down is we often will explain this practicing the presence of God based on our own experience. And what we do when we do it in that way is it kind of really limits God to just our own experience. Again, that he's personal. And so I've really learned to kind of step back and just kind of go, God's at work around us. Let's be looking for him. Let's be on the lookout for him. Instead of saying it's going to be like this, or it has to be like this, because I find I put God in a box and then God's like, oh, just watch me. And so I think being really careful of that. Even I heard a lot of adults who will talk about times that they've heard God's voice, and that's great. And I've heard God's voice and it's great, but you know what? A lot of people go through life and never hear God's voice. And that doesn't mean that they're not intimate with Christ and that they don't have a growing relationship. And so I'm always really careful about trying to put too many parameters or limits on how that can happen. I think that's bad practice.
Can I interrupt you that, when I was learning, well, thank you, Mel. Can you stop me from interrupting? Probably not.
No.
When I was learning really early days, I was fortunate to be in a community where it was kind of the other way, so that numerous people were sharing how they heard from God, and were quite honest about saying, "Oh, I've never heard from him that way." And so that did the other same point as yours, but I was hearing from 5 and 6 and 7 different people on a regular basis how they heard from God.
Yeah.
With that permission of, but this is just how I do it. So it gave me a fuller picture, as I have no idea of, oh, so some people hear from God in this way and some people in this way. And I got that picture of it's very individual. So it's okay if mine's not one of those 6 or 7, mine might be totally different. But yeah, that important point that it's unique to us, like any best friend or any marital relationship, it's different than anybody else's. So
yeah. And I like giving examples and saying, you might be singing a worship song and suddenly, and for kids, I'll go, you might feel something in your tummy. And like all of a sudden you're like, this is a really cool song. And, and just giving those examples and then going, and it might be something else. The other thought I had on here is sometimes we can be creepy without meaning to be. And kids are freaked out by strangers, and so if we're like, God's always at work around you, like God's with it, so it's kind of understanding. Cause I remember I had kids go, well, can he see me naked? And, all of those things. So it's really helping them understand that it's a presence thing, and not making it creepy, not making it like he's in your closet right now. Because that kids' minds, they're always going anyways, and they have this great imagination that is the best and the worst part of who they are. So kind of being real clear about it as well. And then even if you're clear, they still might not quite understand. So leave it open for questions and say, what are you thinking about? Or what are your thoughts? Because then you go, oh, well, no, that's not at all what I meant. Let me fix that, or let me help you with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Gordon?
Well, I think for me personally I was just brought up in kind of an understanding that God is formal, which somewhat means far off, distant, not very approachable. And then because of the religious experiences I had, the churches I went to early on, that sure, God is around, but he doesn't talk to us, and he's silent or maybe even indifferent. And I'll tell you, a lot of that, my own just childhood baggage, as all children, our baggage gets imported onto God. And that in that same way is that adults are present but distant. And so, for me, it's so much of it. It's one of the reasons I talk regularly on these broadcasts, that the name Emmanuel is so important to me, that God is with us, God with us, that idea, and to think he's really here and he really cares and he's really approachable. So some might think it's just your view of a strong authority. A child can be very messed up by that, may need to know that the authoritative God is a little different than the best authority. And for that, Mel, I like to say, there was an era in children's ministry where everyone was trying to say, don't call God the Father, because some kids have bad dads. And as a man teaching, I liked to tell kids, I hope we're developing a love relationship. And I'll tell you what, I try to be the very best dad I can be to my two girls. But even at my best, God is so much better. He's a perfect father that I would like to be like, but never will be. But he's perfect. He's the father that every child wants.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I think another misconception is, and I think this might be a little to your point earlier, Melissa, that there's a certain way to do it, to kind of almost conjure up either the feeling that God is now present, or that you're actually, there's, you got to be in a certain space or place, follow a certain pattern. And so there's a good point to just stop and talk about Brother Lawrence, who we would know. You can do some looking into who Brother Lawrence was, but in the early 17th century, he was a Carmelite. He was a layperson for a Carmelite monastery in Paris. And so he wasn't a priest, but he was a dishwasher in the monastery for years and years and years. And so there's this book that was written. He didn't actually write it. Someone wrote it based on everything that he had said and taught, and just because he would have never thought that he should write such a thing. But the book is called Practicing the Presence of God. And the whole idea there was, even when you're washing dishes, right? And this is a good thing for us to remind adults and children. It's not like this only happens in church or only for certain types of people who are closer, somehow closer to God than others. But no matter what you're doing, you can choose to turn your focus and attention and awareness on God with you, God Emmanuel with you, in any little mundane thing, as simple as it may be, at any time, and grow in relationship with God and in intimacy with God, and come to a whole new understanding of vocation, no matter what you're doing. And so I think that one of the misconceptions is just that no, this is only for a select group of people, or only for a certain environment, or only can happen at camp, right? This is like, that's where you go to hear from God, or, at church on Sunday morning, or whatever, or when you're actually formally praying. But no, this is all built into the fabric of our lives.
And Adam, I think that's why it's so important to make sure that you're not just talking about it at certain sacred moments, but that you're just, as a parent throughout the day, hey, where have you noticed God today? And because otherwise it does become this, I have to be in a building, or I have to have my hands folded or something. And so I love that. Just you can notice God anywhere. And I think that's important, to make sure it's not always a sacred conversation. Those are important, but it's just, this is a part of who we are, which means mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, whoever's in that house, you need to be doing that as well, so that you can help those kids see it.
And I think we have to model that. Sometimes the answer to that is, I really didn't notice him today.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he was distant. It means I didn't notice him. And so that kids know it's okay. It's okay, because we're practicing the presence. But, on your point, Adam, about even dishwashing, not only is it okay, but the more we do practice in the mundane of life, don't you think that's also, we will see more, we will notice more. The more we practice, the more we notice, to where I'm sure Brother Lawrence practiced so much that it was just, well, of course he's here when I'm washing dishes. I see him all the time. So.
Well, and he did practice so much, and his goal was to try and make it so he was constantly aware of God's presence. That was his goal. And I think Mulholland would talk about that as a loving union with God, that just is like what Jesus had, that is just always aware. Jesus said, you'll never see me doing anything that the Father isn't doing. right? And to get to that place where we're just so aware and in union with God that we're just in step.
And isn't that what many would say the scriptures mean by praying without ceasing? Is that we are so in step and so aware that we are doing that. Well, and so speaking of scripture, where would the two of you point people to show them that this spiritual practice, noticing that God is near us, really has a biblical foundation? It's not something we're just making up. It's not, it's yes, it comes out of the spiritual formation world, but it really comes out of the Bible. Where would you look? What would you look at?
So I'm always thinking narrative, because I love narrative with kids. And so there's so many stories, and Joseph is one of my favorite for that, because over and over again, it says, but God was with Joseph. And so like, as he's in the pit, God was with Joseph. As he's in Potiphar's house, God is with Joseph. As he's in prison. And I love that scripture is so clear. And one of the things I talk about is like, hey, this is really hard. And you might not like your life right now, but God is still there. Joseph didn't like his life. God was still there. And, you know, one of the things I teach kids is, and we do actions, like even when I can't feel him, God is always with me, and he never forgets me, because I think that's so important. So Joseph, you look at Daniel in the lion's den, you look at the still small voice too, that is it Elijah or Elisha? One of the prophets, right? That did the prophets of Baal and and all of the Elisha. Okay, I actually thought that. Yes.
Jah killed the prophet.
Really a biblical scholar here. But you know, and it's, you know, this came and this came, but no, it was that small. And I think that's what's so important sometimes too. So I love the Psalms as well for that. But when I'm teaching kids, I'm looking narrative. The other thing I do with kids is I am always asking other people to share their stories with kids, like testimony, but we just call them stories. Tell us your story. And then I'll ask them afterwards, where did you see God in their story? And so when we're able to go and look at a human story and go, I saw God in this part of their story, it's a lot easier than to go to scripture and read some of these stories and go, oh, I see God in that part of the story. So I usually go narrative for teaching.
Yeah. And where do you find him?
Well, I Psalm 23 is it stands out to me for so many reasons. God just keeps using that over and over and over for me to be that gentle reminder. I love different translations and different ways it's worded, but I'm just right off the bat, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. I like that. I lack nothing. Willard wrote a book called Life. Well, he didn't write it, but it was written about his talks, Life Without Lack. And one of the things that we learn to recognize that we don't lack is this constant ongoing withness of God. And I love the verse that says, even when I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I don't have to fear, because I know that God is with me. And so that to me is a great scriptural foundation. And then it's all around. I mean, you see it everywhere in scripture.
Well, and I think for children, the whole concept of a shepherd, you know, they so often see it's a shepherd hanging out with a little flock of sheep, you know, and it's really a little bit bigger deal than that if you're a professional shepherd. But in Psalm 23, it gives them that beautiful view of being present.
Yep.
I always look myself to, I've mentioned this so many times, but the verse that God first gave me that I first recognized coming from him, Psalm 42:8. By day he commands his steadfast love, at night his song is with me, which just tells me around the clock that he's in relationship with me. His love for me and my response in worship and praise. And it reminds me on an adult level that it's true. So keep watching for it. Like you say, Melissa, notice it around me. So
that's so good, Gordon. Yeah. So again, the focus of what we are about here with these conversations, and I love how they always get here, is as we start to move more into now, if we want to really bring children to this place of practicing the presence of God, what becomes that benefit for them that you would point to as a benefit that just starts out young and could go on into the rest of their lives?
Well, I think when I think of it, it is a discipleship thing, and it's helping them really be like, I'm always looking for kids to encounter Jesus in a way that changes them forever. And when they're young and they really begin to notice, boy, God is always at work around me. I'm always thinking of like the 16-year-old who's like, forget God, forget church, forget my family, I'm out of here. And I think it's a lot harder to do that and walk away when you've encountered God. And when you're used to encountering God daily, like just noticing him daily, I think it's a lot harder to run. And so I'm always thinking long term, like not just what do I want them to understand right now, but what do I want them to be haunted by later in life too, in a biblical Christian haunting, like what can they not get away from? And so for me, that's it. I think too, kids deal with so much fear. They deal so much with uncertainty, and pandemic, post-pandemic, we're not there yet, but coming out of a pandemic, there is not a kid alive who hasn't had some sort of trauma. And so I think this idea of understanding, we can go from fear to being really aware. And even in our fear, we can be aware that God is present with us, is so important, especially for kids that have lives that are uncertain. And that's kind of where we're all at right now. So I'm always thinking long term.
And we mentioned that in the resource guide that is available to download, shares that, in fact, let me just read the quotes. Every need becomes insignificant because he is there as the solution, and every challenge is diluted because his purposes are set in eternity past. Every fear is diminished because he is the authority over all things. And so, yes, when we can notice that he's here, all that is ahead of us, kids can start learning that it'll be okay because there's a God. It'll be okay. And of course, they don't really learn that until they have to live through those challenges. But we want them armed with the answer before they need the answer in life.
And Gordon, as they live through those challenges, then this also gives them a perspective as looking back. Recognizing even then, those signposts along the way, all those moments along the way that God was with them, that God is, that he knows, he's always known, God's always been there and is present now, even if this is a new form of suffering.
Yes. And if he was there when I was playing on the playground, then it's much easier to believe he's there while I'm in a trouble or when there's something going wrong. So incredibly important, and I know there's also a wonderful quote from Adele Calhoun's book, that this feels like it steps on my toes a little bit, that the benefit of practicing his presence is, as Calhoun says, living a new way of being by letting go of the need to manipulate, complete, and control. And it is to think, if God is present here, then I don't need to be in control of this situation. I don't need to manipulate, compete, and control in everything I do because God is present. He's taking care of all those things. And boy, does that make a difference.
That's a big one.
I'm a little offended by that quote, and I think we should scrape that out of this. But
Adele Calhoun's husband Doug carpooled with me. We carpooled together for a couple of years as we went to quarterly retreats. So I'll give him a ring and ask him if she could take that out of her book. Because
can we just edit this out? Because I don't care for conviction during conversations.
I just want to make sure, Gordon, you've checked the timeline that this was written before your drive with.
I think it might have been added to the book right about that time for some reason. I don't know.
I always knew I liked Adam, and that was just perfect. This is good.
I'll just be a little more transparent. I when I go to a merchant or someplace and try to fix something where I feel like I've been wronged, and they notice it, they fix it, they're polite, and I hardly say a word. I always feel myself stepping back and going, oh, thank you, God, that you went before me and did that and reminded me that I'm not the one in control of this situation, like I often believe.
Well, those are all wonderful benefits, a great reason for us to continue on this journey. So how do we approach children then with this invitation? I think we talked some about this already. I love some of the language you used, Melissa, just to engage children in this spiritual practice of noticing that God's near. Anything else you'd like to share, just stories or ideas of how those listening can engage this with their kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of creating it's an adventure, because honestly, walking with Jesus is an adventure. And sometimes it's a great adventure, and sometimes you're like, what just happened? And so inviting them along on the adventure, and kids need us as adults to lead the way, but they also need us as adults to step back and let them lead the way, because I find kids are so much more aware of God than I am. And so being willing to kind of lead, but also step back and go, you tell me. And I'm always thinking about making sure that I'm not trying to control or manipulate, because then I get in the way of what God is doing. And I was just out in Seattle actually speaking to real live people. It's been like 4 times in the last couple of months, and it's amazing. But this church I had been at and did a 5th and 6th grade retreat for their kiddos probably 7 years ago. And they were doing alone time with God. And so they're journaling and praying outside. And afterwards, I was kind of talking with them. This little 3rd grader, well, she must have been 5th grade, but little, sits next to me, and she goes, well, Miss Mel, I was looking at the clouds and I saw Santa. And I was like, oh dear. Like, and you're immediately like, well, this is awkward. What? And I want to control it, right? And I want to go, well, maybe it was Moses. Have you heard of the Transfiguration? And it's like, okay, no, that's not helpful. And so, but I was kind of panicking, and and God is so gracious and kind, because he just kind of shut me up for a minute. And I asked her, I said, well, what do you think that was about? And she goes, I don't know, but it just made me laugh. And I was like, you know what, isn't it great that God just makes us laugh sometimes? And and she's like, oh yeah. I was like, whoo, I dodged that bullet. But it's one of those where I think we're so quick to like spiritualize everything, and we forget that it's not so much about what I'm putting on you, but what God is doing in you. And so I was so cool to be back at this church and see where we had sat, and just remember that and go, oh, God taught me a lot just through that one little moment of just, hey, Mel, just kind of gently shut up and let me go ahead and do the work I'm trying to do. So that's kind of my encouragement to us as we think through this as well.
Yeah, that's excellent. You've taught me that a lot, Mel, is that whole point of waiting to let the child unpack what they're learning, what they're hearing. Because oftentimes it can sound just terrible to us. But what they're hearing, what they're interpreting it as is wonderful. And their interpretation can be like, oh yeah, that's from God. Where I thought you were going, no, but that's okay.
And how you got there, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That was an interesting route. Yeah.
And let me just also again bring this up. You were talking about a time where you were sitting on a bench next to a child, right? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
And so you didn't have you didn't think you had to be in a certain place for this to happen, or have certain amenities around you to be able to do whatever the next right thing is. You just, in the moment, you were just present to that child, being present to God.
Yeah. And I think that's always my heart. And God really convicted me probably 5 years ago and just said, hey, Mel, you're making disciples out of yourself instead of out of me. And I was like, well, rude, ouch. But what I realized was I was setting everything up to kind of revolve around me, because I'm the guest speaker, I'm the whatever. And so I'm always thinking about that. I'm always thinking about, where can I have quiet moments, and where can I make sure that they are, what I always think about is, whether I'm teaching for Sunday school or VBS, or I'm at a camp, whatever it is, I'm never thinking, what do I want them to learn today? I'm always thinking about, what do I want them to take home? And if they can't practice the presence of Jesus here, they aren't going to take it home. But if I make it contingent on the place or the moment or the environment, then they don't take that home. And if I make it contingent on me, then I'm starting a little cult, and I'm not okay with that. So that's where I'm always kind of going, well, what do you think about that? Because I don't want to get in the way. And so I'm always looking for, well, what do you think? And where do you think you can, and do you know you could do that at home? Do you know that's something you could? And that, I think, it's intentional on my part, not because I'm so wise, but I just was real dumb for a while, and God convicted me. And I don't I don't want my legacy to be kids who think their faith and their walk with Jesus is contingent on Miss Mel. I'm not interested in that. So I'm
KidZ Heart,
intentional about it.
At KidZ Heart, we talk about a lot about how as adults we need to realize and remember that the Holy Spirit is the teacher, not us, and that our job is to impact the sphere of the child's life. So you impact hundreds of children's spheres of their camp life and their piece there, but it's setting it up so that they and the Holy Spirit can meet, and the same that we do at home, at school, wherever they are. So just so agreeing with what you're saying, where they learn how to be present with Jesus and how to recognize that the Spirit is there speaking with them.
And I say, I don't want to be the hero of the story. And so that's a really good phrase for me to go, I'm not the hero of the story. And that's the Holy Spirit. That's God's job. And that helps me align mission, vision, where I'm going, and even how I speak, to make sure I'm not the hero.
Yeah. Which is especially hard when you're as popular as Mel.
I could be an amazing hero. No.
And it would be so fun.
It'd be very fun, but no thanks. We'll leave that to God.
Well, once again, Mel, it has been a delight, and we are glad that you're starting to get back out there on the road. God bless you as you minister to those kiddos of all ages. And, as our listeners know by now, we want to invite you all to download the free, reproducible, shareable, please pass it around resource guide from the website, which you can get at kidzathome.org, kids with a Z, kidzathome.org. And then please share that with other ministry leaders. We also would love for you to join us at the Transforming Kids Ministry Facebook group. And again, it's Kids with a Z, Transforming Kids Ministry Facebook group. And please, Mel, we'd love to see some videos and quips and what happens at your next speaking piece when you're with various age kids or things from home. Listeners, we'd love to have that. And if you would, though, now, Mel, if you would bless us by just asking God to do a transformational work in all of us and in our children as we enjoy his presence, we would so appreciate you closing us out with that.
Absolutely. Let's pray. Oh, Father, we are thankful for you. We're thankful that you are at work around us. God, we're thankful for the important reminder that that we don't need anything but you, and that you don't even need us. You just are going to do your work. So may we just sit back, Lord, and may we notice you. So God, I'm not going to invite you in. I'm not going to ask you to meet me here. I'm just going to say, help me to notice you, because you are at work around me. So help me to notice you more today. Help each of us to notice you. And God, may we tune our ears to you and tune our ears to the little ones who are, I think, seeing you on a whole different level than we can. And may we learn from them. So God, thanks for being present. May we notice you in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you.
We're going to wrap up our time as we have been the last few sessions by just giving some time and some space for people to practice what they've heard in these conversations. And this is a great one. So there's just going to be a couple minutes here after we're done and we say goodbye with some music, and just slow down just for a little bit. Just take a couple minutes. If you're driving, keep your eyes on the road, but just pay attention to what God might be wanting to share with you in this space. Practice the presence of God for the next few minutes. All right. God bless you.